So I'm going to start off with this famous photograph, one of the most iconic photographs in the 20th century, certainly the most famous photograph from the Apollo missions. And there are three things in this photograph that prove fakery, that this didn't happen on the moon. Okay, and so the first of these is, notice where this horizon goes across in relationship to the astronaut. It goes across his face. And that is impossible because the astronauts had their cameras always at their chest, like Neil Armstrong does there. That's in the visor of Buzz Aldrin. This is Buzz Aldrin. And the astronauts always had their cameras at their chest. As a matter of fact, there was a bracket there on their spacesuit to hold the camera. And notice where the horizon is here in these frames from a film. It's at their chest where the camera is. And that's how it has to be when two astronauts, or two people, actually, any two people, are standing just a few feet away from each other with their cameras at chest level and taking pictures of each other. The horizon has to be at their chest. It's a very basic problem of geometry, and it's a fact. So you see this astronaut in this guy's visor. He has his camera at his chest. Okay, this is how it should be. Okay, this is when they did it correctly. The photo that I started with, that famous photo, it was done incorrectly. Here is a photograph I took of myself, and to do this, I put a camera on a tripod, and I put it at my chest. Okay, the camera at my chest. This is another photograph I took, and here, oh, by the way, did I mention in this photograph, the horizon is at my chest. That was the first photograph I took. In this photograph, I made it so that the horizon was at my face. And to do that, I had to raise the camera by over a foot, and I had to put the tripod on this stand. Okay, and so there's the camera now. That's a big difference, a very big difference in relationship to the height of a person. You can't dismiss that. When two people are standing on reasonably level ground, and there are some pits there, but that's not significant. That's just a matter of inches, not feet. And so that when the terrain is reasonably level and two people are standing close to each other and they're of about the same height, which Armstrong and Aldrin were, you have to have the camera the horizon at chest level, where the cameras are. So they got it right sometimes, like here. They got it wrong other times, like the famous photograph. And here's another case where they got it wrong. So what's going on here? What's going on is pretty simple, actually. This photograph was not taken on the moon. It was taken on a moon set here on Earth. And probably for all these photographs that we're going to be looking at that are allegedly from the moon, all of these photographs were probably taken by professional photographers, not astronauts at all. The people inside these suits may not have been astronauts all the time. That could be the case. But at any rate, so they made mistakes, like here. And so this photographer in this case probably undoubtedly put the camera up to his face because he was taking a normal photograph in the normal way. He forgot to put the camera down at take the picture from a position which is equivalent to chest height. So that's what happens when you're faking things. You get it right sometimes, you get it wrong sometimes. Reality is just what it is. It's not right or wrong, it's just the way it is. You don't make mistakes in reality. Or you do, but that's another story. And the Apollo program was very long. It was about 4 years long. The landings, the part of it with the landings was about 4 years long. It was a huge, complex project, and you make mistakes when you're faking things so complicated. Okay, let's move on to the second problem with this photograph, and that is that the astronaut is clearly standing under a spotlight, and the ground is very unevenly lit. So this is impossible for two reasons. One, the astronauts didn't take any huge lights, floodlights, spotlights, any large lamps to the moon. And as NASA says so itself. All the outdoor lighting was supposed to be by sunlight. Secondly, on the moon, there is no such uneven lighting at all, except for maybe right at sunrise or sunset. And here you see the indications of a fall-off area. That is a photographic term when you have a spotlight and then you have the darkened area around the spotlight. There is no dusk or dawn or twilight on the moon of any significant duration, only day or night, because of the lack of an atmosphere. The sun is either in the sky or it is not. Therefore, the landscape is either brightly lit or it is black. Ground illumination by the sun anywhere is even or uniform, assuming reasonably level, homogeneous terrain. No large lamps were taken to the moon to provide extra lighting, and NASA affirms this. So for these reasons, this what we're seeing here is not on the moon. This is not a photograph taken on the moon. They corrected this problem. That original photograph was from Apollo 11. This is later missions, so they corrected that problem. This is how the lighting of the ground should be. It should be completely even. Just like it's even around me here and around my telescope out there in the desert. There is no concentration of light, and there would be no reason for any such concentration of light. Here are a couple more photographs from Apollo 11, and you can see the spotlight effect, especially in this photograph. It's very clear. So what we're seeing, without doubt, is lighting by spotlight, a floodlight of some sort. Maybe not necessarily quite that focused, but a floodlight nonetheless. Artificial lighting, in other words. And here is a soccer field lit by natural sunlight, and as you can see, there's no concentration of light anywhere. Here is a soccer field at night, and there's obvious fall-off area around the field and even inside the field, because the illumination is not going to be even with floodlights across a very large area. Natural sunlight, even through clouds, the sunlight diffuses the light, and it's all around. Here the fields are lit, and of course they don't want to light up the entire neighborhood, so clear-cut fall off around the field. The third problem with this photograph, and we're talking about major problems, there are probably other problems that some other investigators have seen as well, but the third huge problem with this photograph is that this astronaut should be completely black. Okay, at least extremely dark, if not literally completely black. And that's because on the moon there is no atmosphere to diffuse the light, which is what causes what would be dark shadows on the Earth to be reasonably well lit. So here you can see how well lit he is. If that were writing, and you could focus, and the photograph was better focused, you would be able to read it. Everything is perfectly well seen. That would be impossible on the moon. All shadowed surfaces on the moon are extremely dark, pretty much black, since unlike on Earth, there is no atmosphere to scatter, diffuse, and spread the sun's rays and thereby illuminate surfaces not in direct sunlight. Light-dark contrast is extreme and severe. It is the moon's total lack of an atmosphere that renders its surface so sharp and clear to our view that we can see minute detail on it all the way from Earth. So this is an amateur photograph, and we're going to rely mainly on amateur photographs because you can't trust most Apollo photographs, NASA photographs. And you can see how inside the shadowed areas, it's completely black. And this is how all photographs, properly exposed photographs of the moon are. Like inside that crater, it is pitch black. Here's a well-lit side of a crater in the sun, in the sunlight, and here on the shadowed side, it's black. Same thing with this mountain, this central peak, well lit on the sun side, black on the shadowed side. And here's another central mountain. This is actually from Copernicus, and same thing, black shadows. The Earth is a different story. You have shadowed surfaces which are quite well seen. This peak is casting this shadow, and you can see inside there. This is a low light situation, probably near dusk or dawn, and still you can see inside there. And if you were standing in there, of course you would see things. You know, you wouldn't have trouble seeing anything in there. This is a special case. This is Meteor Crater in Arizona, also known as Barringer Crater. It's the best preserved large crater, meteorite crater on Earth. So it looks very much like how moon craters in general look. And you can see right into it even with the shadow. And here's a man standing in front of Meteor Crater, and you can see his shadowed side for the same exact reason that you can see the crater's shadowed side. It's because of the atmosphere scattering light. The correct definition of daylight is sun-illuminated atmosphere. On the moon, there is no such sun-illuminated atmosphere. So if you had an astronaut standing here and you were photographing him, let's say you were on this side, on the right side, and you were photographing this astronaut standing on the rim of that crater, like this guy is standing there, okay? And you took his photograph with this side of the crater in the background. This would be black, just like it looks right there. And the astronaut himself would be black for the same reason, that they're not receiving direct sunlight. The astronaut would not look like this. He would be black. Now there is a special case on Earth where you have very dark shadowed surfaces, and that is in low light silhouette situations. In fact, it's a genre in photography called contre-jour, and it can be a desired effect. But let's say you wanted to light up these shadowed subjects, okay? What would you do, or what would you have to do? You'd have to overexpose it. That would be one option. Overexpose the photograph, and then you would see how dark it is under this porch and inside that window. Well, you can light it up by overexposing the photograph, okay? But of course that would ruin the overall picture, so you wouldn't want to do that. But there's another option, and that's using low light flash fill. So here you have a woman in a silhouette situation. She would normally be dark, her shadow would be dark, but here she has no shadow, and that's because the photographer is using the flash on his camera. Another term for this is fill flash with backlight. The key is backlight. So here he is photographing this woman and into the sun, and here's what you get. You get a dark subject. So what does he do? He uses his flash on his camera. You can see how it lights her up right there. And lo and behold, you have a well-lit subject even in what would normally be a silhouette situation. On the moon, or rather in the Apollo photographs where they're allegedly on the moon, you have clear-cut silhouette situations. This is supposed to be the moon. Excuse me, this is supposed to be the sun, but of course it's not. It's just a bright spotlight. And this photograph is probably taken indoors. It's undoubtedly a moonset. It's probably an indoor moonset, which would normally be dark, except for that light. Okay, and this is a silhouette situation. This should be dark. This should be quite dark. And here, this is Apollo 11. This is Buzz Aldrin climbing down from the LEM, allegedly. Okay, he should look dark, at least as dark as that woman there. If he were on the moon, he would be completely black. But even in an Earth studio, in this situation, in an indoor studio with that light, with that bright light, he should be dark, just at least as dark as that woman there. See, here he is, inside, still inside the cabin of the LEM, inside, and on the shadow side of the LEM, and you can see clear as day. And there again, here he's climbing down. And notice here his boot. There's a hot spot. That's a photographic term, a hot spot on his boot. That indicates a specific, definite source of light, secondary light, apart from the alleged sun being used to illuminate the shadowed side. And here he is again, and again, look at the boots, hot spots. Okay. So a secondary source of light was certainly being used. And here's another case where the astronaut should be dark. If he were on the moon, he'd be black. Even in an indoor studio with the light up there being the only source of light, he should be pretty dark, even on Earth. But he's well lit, and that indicates that a secondary source of light is being used as backlight. And this is an animation to show how the astronaut would look if he were really on the moon. He would be black, and so would the moon rover, by the way, that side of the moon rover. Whoops. There you see the difference. Okay, again, and these are not isolated cases or instances. This happens again and again, where you have clear-cut silhouette situations. There's no way in the world that this should be or would be so well lit if this were on the moon. So what they did was they flashed or they used some lighting, okay, to light up the shadowed side. It's that simple. That's what they did. And notice that when you do that, you don't illuminate the ground very much. Okay, the ground is relatively unaffected. So here in this photograph, this original photograph again, you can see evidence of secondary lighting, and you can tell that from the dark surfaces in this photograph on the shadowed side of that astronaut, on top of his helmet, on the top of his backpack, and the top of his shoulder. Why would that be? Why would you have that differentiation in the lighting between those surfaces and the vertical surfaces? In reality, if you were on the moon, he would be dark, and he would be uniformly dark. And even on Earth, in a studio with that light up there as the only source of light, he should still be uniformly dark. This difference in the lighting of horizontal and vertical surfaces, he's well lit on vertical surfaces, that indicates a secondary source of light being used. Now this here is a beautiful case study showing the necessity of backlight, secondary lighting, to illuminate shadows on the moon. The absolute necessity. What this photographer did was he took a well-exposed photograph of Tycho. This is Tycho crater here. Okay, and then he deliberately overexposed the photograph, so to light up the inside of Tycho, which he succeeded in doing. That's the original. or the first photograph he took, I should say, and then the overexposed one. So he wanted specifically to light up the inside of Tycho, and he did. But what did that require? It required a huge amount of backlight. Tycho is 53 miles in diameter, 53 miles across, and that crater rim provided an enormous amount of backlight. So lighting up the inside of Tycho crater took three exceptional conditions. One, the overexposure of the photograph. Two, a huge amount of backlight, sunlight reflected off a 53-mile diameter rim. And three, a relatively young crater with a well-sculpted vertical rim, which is what Tycho had, as you can see there. Okay. Now, look at the other craters near Tycho, which are almost as big, okay, but they don't have that nice rim on the sunlit side, okay, it's like Tycho does. So you don't have a whole lot of backlight, and they're dark inside, they're black inside. Now, interestingly, and same thing with these small craters here. Now, interestingly, these craters, these small craters here, are young craters with nicely sculpted rims, okay, that reflect a whole lot of light, and they're lighter inside. And these, by the way, are also very large. They're not as large as Tycho, but we're talking something like on the order of 10 miles across. So that's what it takes to light up craters on the moon, and any shadows on the moon, is a huge amount of backlight. And even that wouldn't have been enough. The photograph had to be overexposed. So this is a properly exposed photograph, and there is no huge amount of secondary light there. Or if it was on the moon, there would not have been any huge amount of backlight, and so the astronaut would have been